Start with graphing points. Yeah. So when we're in an XY plane, okay, and you need to graph a point, it has how many parts? 4 quadrants, but each point has how many parts? An X coordinate and a Y coordinate. And the X tells you how many to go over left or right. Negative moves left, positive moves right. And the Y tells you how many to go up or down, right? Okay. What if I asked you to graph the point 2, -1? Tell me what that means. Positive 2 on X, so that would mean to which direction, right or left? Right. And then what? 1 down. Do I put a point here and here? You just put 1 point. You're absolutely right. So this is 2, -1. Okay. How about if I wanted to do 0, 3? You stay on the Y and you just go up 3. Easy enough? Can everyone in here graph any point that I give you? I want to make sure before we start graphing lines.
Yes, ma'am.
Even if they're both negative? -2, -3. Back 2, down 3. Everybody feels good about that? Okay, then let's talk about graphing lines. I'll give y'all a second to copy. Talk about some characteristics of lines before we graph them. Tell me some things that lines have when you're talking about in terms of graphing. Coordinates, but what else? They have what? At least 2 points. Tell me something else you know about lines. Starts with an S is what I'm trying to get. They have a slope. Tell me what slope means. What does slope describe? How much incline it has, the steepness of the line. So the bigger the slope gets, the steeper the line gets, right? And if I have a positive slope, it's going to go look like uphill, and a negative slope goes down. Tell me another way to describe slope in terms of like a ratio. Rise over run. Now, which axis rises? The X or the Y? The Y. And which one runs? The X. So I could also say that this is the change in Y divided by the change in X, which y'all probably remember learning as Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1 given 2 points on the line. We remember doing all that? No? Okay. Let's say I told you that this particular line had the point 2, 1, and had a slope, and I'm going to use M to represent slope. Had a slope of 2/3. And I said, graph that line that's represented by that information. Well, right now I don't want you to write the equation. Right now I just want you to practice graphing it. So let's plot the point 2, 1. That means go which way? Right or left? Right, because it's positive. And up 1. Now if I want to do this slope, remember slope is rise over run. So I'm going to go up how many? 2. And I'm going to run how many? and then I'm going to connect. Does that make sense? So I started at this point. I probably should have done some other colors here. I started at this point, and then I used this to go up 2 over 3. Okay, so I'm going to make you a little note here. For positive slope, we're always going to go up and then right. But what if it's negative? What happens if you go down? What if I went down and left? Look at that slope. It's still a positive slope. Down and right. You always want to move right. So I'm going to go down and right. What if my slope is a whole number? Like, what if I said start at -2, -1 with a slope of 3? Into a fraction. How do I make it into a fraction? I put it over what? 1. So again, exactly. It's not changing the value there. I start here, and now I'm going to go rise 3, run 1. Let's stay on the same one, doing negative slope. That's what I probably should have done. Let's say 2, 0 with a slope of -1/2. Start at 2, 0. This time it's negative, so what do I do? Negative slope means I go what? Look, down and right. So down 1 and right 2. Remember, we're always going to move right. It's just if we go up or down. Does that make sense to everybody? Sure? Okay. All right, so let's look at some equations and lines. Let's look first at the one you're probably most familiar with, that you like the best. What form is this called? Slope-intercept. Why is it called slope-intercept? Exactly. This is what? Slope. This is what? Close. What's the B represent? The what? The Y what? The y-intercept. Slope-intercept. Now what does intercept mean? Where what meets? The line meets what? The X or Y axis. That's right. You're right. So it's where it crosses that axis. So if it's the y-intercept, it's where it crosses the y-axis. And if it's the x-intercept, it's where it crosses the x-axis. So we're going to say crosses the y-axis. So let's look at a couple of equations and see if you can pick out the slope and the y-intercept. What's the slope? 2/3. That means I'm rising 2 and going over 3. That's right. What about the y-intercept? 1. How would I graph that? Do I have a point? Yeah. It's a point on the y-axis, but it's still a point, right? 1. So if I'm in this form to graph it, the first thing I want to do is plot the y-intercept. That's the B. Now I have a point and I have a slope. What do I do? Come on, guys, you can do this. Rise over run. And I'm going to write this as a step here in your notes to apply the slope. So if the slope is 2/3, that means I'm rising 2 and running how many? 3. Oh, I forgot to hit record. We just isolated the y and divided by 2. Now tell me what, say that again, I'm sorry.
You put the -2 on the graph?
You put the -2 on the graph first because the first thing we want to do is plot the y-intercept. How do I do a -3 slope? I go down 3, 1, 2, 3. Do I move right or left? Right. Always right. Right is always right. Does that make sense? What if I had something that looked like this? And I don't even have to graph it, I just need to know the slope and the y-intercept. What do I need to do? What's it need to look like to pick that information out? Y equals mx plus b. So I need to get y by itself. How can I get y by itself? I could divide, but before I divide, subtract what? -2x. So subtracting -2x is the same thing as adding 2x. All right, well, this one's gone, so I got 3y minus 6 equals 2x. What now? Plus 6. I'm still doing the same. I'm solving this time for y instead of x. Now what? Divide by 3. Remember, it goes to both, so I got 2/3 x plus 6 over 3. So what's the slope? 2 over 3. What's the y-intercept? 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's talk about ways to graph then other than, because today we're focusing on graphing, so we talked about if it's in slope-intercept form and how we can get it in slope-intercept form if it's not. But there's another way that's easy to graph that's called standard form. And in general, we have, when we do slope-intercept, we have mx plus b. Standard form looks like this. How many of you have seen this form before? So maybe something like 2x plus 3y equals 12. Okay? And you've probably graphed this a certain way. I don't know how your teachers have told you in the past, but when I taught Algebra 1, I used to teach cover-up. You cover up this part to find the x-intercept. You cover up that part to find the y-intercept. So, and the reason we do that is because, now remember we said intercepts are places that cross the axis, right? To find the y-intercept, And this is very important. You'll want to star this in your notes because this is true for any equation, not just lines. The y-intercept is when x equals 0. So if you flip that around, the x-intercept is when y equals 0. So to graph in standard form, instead of finding the slope and doing all that, we're going to graph it by the intercepts. And I think you'll see why we call it cover up sometimes whenever we talk about it. It's easy, right. It's easy because if I first find, let's do y-intercept first. So let x equal 0. Well, if you look at that equation, if you let x equal 0, well, that just becomes 0, so it goes away. Does that make sense? So if 3y equals 12, what does y equal? 4. Y-intercept, y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4. So same thought process for the x-intercept. Let y equal 0. So 2x plus 3 times 0 equals 12. Well, that piece is kind of going away because it's plus 0. So if 2x is 12, what is x? 6. So what we really did was we covered up this piece, 2x equals 12. Well, if 2x equals 12, x equals 6. And then we covered up this piece and we said, well, if 3y equals 12, then y equals 4. So you can cover up the pieces and find the other intercepts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do, I hope y'all are writing these down because a lot of these are actually coming from your homework. If I asked you to graph that, so the first thing you want to look at is what's the form that it's in now? Am I going to have to move anything around to get it in any other form? Well, this one's standard form, and standard form is pretty easy to graph in, right? Cover up. If 8x equals 6, what does x equal? This one doesn't come out quite as nice. 6 over 8 is the same thing as 3/4, which means just go to your x-axis and go almost to 1. How about the y-intercept? Carry the sign with it though. So I got negative 2y equals 6. So y is negative 3. So with those two forms, you should be able to graph any line I give you. Yes? Okay. Even if you have to manipulate it a bit to get it in the correct form. Just one more thing I want to talk to you about, and I promise I'm done. And we've really already talked about it. If you need to find the intercepts of lines that are not in standard form, you still do the same thing. And you don't have to rewrite this if you don't want to. I think you have it written somewhere else. But to find the x-intercept, you plug in 0 for y. And to find the y-intercept, we plug in 0 for x. So for example, I have what intercept are you given there? What's the form of that line? Slope intercept. So slope intercept gives me The y-intercept, right? So for these, it'll say find the intercepts. Well, the y-intercept is easy because it's slope-intercept form, but the x-intercept is a little bit harder. So to find the x-intercept, what do? Plug in 0 for which one? Y. Can you solve that now for x? Sure. This is what we did Friday. How do you get x by itself? What do you do first? Move the 3. Boy, y'all must really be asleep. How do I get rid of the negative 1/4? Divide, but I don't want to divide by a fraction. What would I rather do? Multiply by the reciprocal. Negative 4/1. What's negative 3 times negative 4/1? 12. So there are my two intercepts, even though it wasn't in standard form to start with. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, let me give you